Welcome back to the channel, guys. I'm Phil, got my co-host with me, Sam, and we're doing part 2 of the greatest general in history, Alexander the Great.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the first one. It was very informative.
What did you like about the first one in finding it informative?
Honestly, I didn't really know a ton about his story. I knew obviously he conquered a lot. He's talked a lot about in history, but I didn't really know about like how that came to be.
You're talking about like the evolution of Greece and stuff as well?
Yeah, and even just kind of like, you know, his like the story with his father and then him, you know, coming into power when his father his father died, and like the whole situation with like Macedonians and Greeks.
Seemed like we had some references to 300, the movie 300 there too, right?
Yeah, which we had talked about potentially watching soon. So.
Yeah, that's right. So I haven't done that yet, but we are coming back to this here. So let's get into part 2, the greatest general in history.
In 334 BC, Alexander, the 21-year-old king of Macedonia, led a coalition of Greek forces against the greatest power of the age, the Persian Empire.
Beef is coming.
He led an army of skilled veterans. At its heart, men of the Macedonian phalanx, armed with the 18-foot sarissa pike, and the elite horsemen of his companion cavalry. Together, at the Battle of the River Granicus, they'd won a first decisive victory over the Persian army. Now, as Alexander approached Sardis, capital of the Persian province of Lydia, its commander surrendered without a fight.
Wow.
But before Alexander could advance further, he needed to neutralize Persian naval power. Persia had a powerful fleet with major naval bases around the eastern Mediterranean that could potentially cut his lines of communication back to Greece.
I can't even imagine what a naval fleet would look like in this time period.
Yeah.
It's crazy to think that they even had naval fleets this long ago. We're talking, you know, almost 3,000 years ago.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess it really is just an army on a boat, no?
Well, no, I think this is controlling the seas, right? So they obviously have to have weaponry on the boat as well in some capacity.
True. I mean, I guess at this period of time, though, right, it's all like handheld weapons. So.
Well, they were using, like they just said, the 18-foot pike, right?
Yeah. I mean,
so,
I wonder if they took those on a boat.
Well, yeah, I assume that, I would guess that they had men on boats, and then, you know, you would have those planks, right, where you'd come upside a boat and then throw the plank across, and then you'd run across onto the other boat.
Yeah, or if you have like an 18-foot thing, you could just stand on one and be like...
Clearly, she wants to do something to my eyeball. And but I was more thinking along the lines of if they had any kind of...
Like, would they have like cannons and stuff back then, or no?
I don't think so. That's what I was saying. Like, maybe they have arrows.
Yeah, like archery.
Right? I don't think gunpowder was being used at this point yet.
Fair.
But anyways, let's continue.
Rather than challenge the Persians at sea, Alexander decided to attack its nearest bases, the Greek coastal cities of Miletus and Halicarnassus. Both put up determined resistance, but were taken by winter. The following spring of 333 BC, Alexander continued his advance into Lycia and Phrygia. At Gordium, he was shown the legendary Gordian Knot. A prophecy said that whoever could unpick it would rule all Asia. Alexander simply took his sword and sliced it in half.
Picked it all right.
So much for unpicking.
Meanwhile, Memnon of Rhodes, a skilled Greek general in Persian service, led Persian warships into the Aegean and captured the islands of Chios and Lesbos. But after Memnon's sudden death from illness, the offensive was abandoned. 18 months had passed since Alexander's army crossed the Hellespont and invaded the Persian Empire. Now Alexander led his men into Cilicia and was soon poised to cross the Nur Mountains into Syria. But then the main Persian army, led by King Darius III himself, emerged behind the Greek army to the north. Darius was determined to trap and destroy Alexander's army, which he outnumbered almost 2 to 1.
Wow.
So he blocked Alexander's only escape route by moving his army to the coastal plain near Issus, just 6 miles wide, from mountains to sea. The narrow battlefield would force Alexander to fight, but it also prevented Darius exploiting his huge numerical advantage. His army, by some estimates, was up to 100,000 strong, and contained some of the finest soldiers in his vast empire, including 10,000 of his own household troops, known as the Immortals. His best cavalry were massed on his right towards the sea, where the ground was better for horses. His best infantry, his Greek mercenary hoplites, formed the center. Persian infantry formed his left wing. Alexander deployed his own army for battle, once again entrusting his left wing, nearest the sea, to Parmenion, with the Greek cavalry and infantry. In the center, as always, was the Macedonian phalanx. Alexander positioned himself and his best troops on the right wing toward the mountain slopes, his elite Agriane javelin throwers, his archers, and behind them the Hypaspists and the companion cavalry. When Alexander...
This is crazy because it's highlighting the importance and the relevance today when we hear the term battle formations. You know, this is it through and through.
Yeah, like the strategy as to why you're placing people, where you're placing them, and who's leading them, and what their plan is going to be.
Yeah, it's, you know, you've got your chess pieces that you're placing on the map, right?
Yeah.
Literally. And, you know, that's what I was thinking when they said that they went into that small ridge, although they were pinned down, right? You couldn't have the numerical advantage in that position, and it would come down to attrition, probably more so, that you hope we're going to keep them there, pin them down, and then keep coming at them. And, you know, we've got 100,000 people we got to go through, so we'll be fine at the end of the day.
Yeah, fair.
Unless these guys just keep chopping you down, or they have a better strategy or a better formation where they can take advantage of you in some capacity, right?
Yeah, it's crazy. Also, this is so cool how they show with this like 3D model of people of how it's all laid out. Like, it really gives you a visual for what it would have looked like, which is nuts.
Yeah, it's also very interesting when we see the map, right? We see these different places in Persia or in Greece, and, you know, we saw Syria, right? Syria is still a name that's prevalent today. Yeah. Many thousands of years, not many thousands, but many years later.
Yeah.
And then you have other names like, I think it was Circia or something like that, that, you know, you don't see at all anymore.
Yeah,
They've just
the majority
vanished.
of these names have all changed.
They just vanished into history as those territories have changed, right? But it's very interesting to see how some of them have prevailed at the same time.
Yeah.
Saw the strength of the Persian cavalry facing Parmenion on the left. He moved across his Thessalian cavalry to reinforce him. Despite his overwhelming numbers, Darius held his position behind a small river, the Pinarus, and waited for Alexander to attack. He didn't have to wait long. Alexander called out to his men, urging them to fight bravely, picking out some by name. Then, at the head of his army's right wing, he charged. Once again, the speed and shock of the Macedonian advance sent the enemy reeling back. But in the center of the battlefield, the Macedonian phalanx was in trouble. In its effort to keep up with Alexander, its formation had become disordered. Now, in fierce fighting with Darius's Greek mercenaries, the phalanx was slowly being driven back. Alexander, seeing the danger, regrouped and led the companions in a headlong charge straight at the Persian center. The Greek mercenaries threatened on their flank were soon in disarray, and the Macedonian phalanx was able to resume its advance. Alexander fought his way towards the great king Darius himself.
It's coming for you, bro.
Wow.
Rather
Showdown.
than face this apparently mad and fearless Macedonian king, Darius fled the battlefield in his royal chariot. Meanwhile, the Macedonian left wing under Parmenion was in a desperate fight against the best of the Persian cavalry. If the Persians could break through here, they could envelop Alexander's army and snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. But Parmenion and his troops fought doggedly and continued to hold the Persians at bay. As the news that Darius had fled spread among his troops, they abandoned the fight and tried to save themselves. The battle turned into a massacre. Ptolemy, one of the Macedonian commanders, told Alexander there were so many Persian dead, his men had used them to fill a deep ravine so they could cross over it.
That's wild.
Wild. Holy crap. That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, the tactics paying off, right? And this second episode of this that we're doing, it seemingly is so far as highlighted. Of course, Alexander the Great, everybody knows his name, but he's also relying on key personnel in a part of his army as well to really, hold up certain sections of his entire board of chess pieces, right? Because if one of them fails, then as they were alluding to there, that the whole battle could be lost, right? So he's got to rely on these key figures within his own army as well to really, make sure that things are executed and efficient and done very efficiently.
Yeah, and also I think it's easy to forget that once you go into battle and you have people charging at you and all this is going on, to get caught up in what you're doing, but not being able to continue to pay attention to what the other components are doing, right? Mm-hmm. He needed to be aware of what was going on in his own unit, but every other one, because it said how he ended up taking charge of another unit and then changing the plan to bring them through the center so that it could support the people with the phalanx, I think they said, the long thing. So, it's that wasn't the original plan, but it makes sense, right? Because if all of these people have these really long weapons, they kind of need to stay in formation for it to be effective. Because once you start having gaps and holes, that's where things are going to get messed up, right? So if he wasn't paying attention and aware of that because he's fighting his own battle, it could have gone very differently.
Exactly.
The Battle of Issus was a stunning victory for Alexander. And amongst the spoils of victory were Darius's wife, mother, and 3 children, all taken alive and well treated by Alexander. With the Persian field army in retreat, Alexander now turned to subduing the western territories of the Persian Empire. The next year, 332, the coastal cities of Phoenicia submitted to Alexander, ending Persian naval power in the Mediterranean. But the island city of Tyre resisted. Tyre's defenders fought bravely and skillfully, even when Alexander began building a causeway to the island, protected by 2 giant siege towers, which they counterattacked with fire ships. But after 7 months, the city walls were breached and Tyre fell.
7 months.
Most of its citizens were killed or enslaved. Gaza, too, was taken by siege. Alexander continued to Pelusium on the Nile Delta, where the Persian governor of Egypt surrendered the entire province to Alexander, along with the royal treasury.
Wow.
Wow.
Nobody wants beef with Alexander.
At Memphis, priests of this ancient land welcomed Alexander as their liberator from Persian rule, and crowned him pharaoh.
Wow.
At the mouth of the Nile, he founded a new city, Alexandria. Then travelled to the desert oracle of Siwa, where according to some accounts the priests welcomed him as son of Amun, king of the gods.
Big shoes.
Alexander returned east to Tyre, where in 331 BC he received news of trouble back home. Despite his great victories over the Persians, many Greeks regarded Alexander as a tyrant. King Agis of Sparta, with Persian support, now launched a revolt against Macedonia. Antipater, Alexander's commander in Greece, was already dealing with rebellion in Thrace. But he quickly marched south and met Agis in battle near the city of Megalopolis. Even the legendary Spartans were now no match for Macedonian military power. The Spartan army was crushed. King Agis himself was among the fallen.
So much for Sparta.
With his base in Greece secure once more, Alexander advanced towards the Persian heartlands, seeking a final showdown with Darius. He received a letter from the Persian king offering him a fortune in gold, his daughter in marriage, and half his empire in exchange for peace. But Alexander's stunning victories, all the oracles and acclamations, had now convinced him that his destiny was to rule the world. He rejected the Persian king's offer. He didn't want half the empire. He was coming to take it all. Research and artwork for this video comes from Osprey Publishing's extensive range of books on ancient history. Every Osprey book examines a particular battle, campaign, or combat.
Osprey giving us the deets, and epic history is always coming through with great narration, and we've got, like you said, the animations as well.
Yeah, they do awesome with these videos.
Yeah, they really do. And you know, a going theme though with conquerors is starting to bubble with Alexander, and that the ego tends to take hold.
Yeah, I mean, do you really need to be in control of the entire world?
Yeah, I think just at that point though, it's moved beyond anything like resources or control of things. It's literally about, you know, being a conqueror.
Power.
and trying to see how far you can go. And clearly Tiffany is also a conqueror, if you heard that. Yeah, I mean, just, you know, I was wondering where we were going to go with that. Like, you know, how does maybe Alexander get himself into trouble?
Yeah.
And
like, how far are we going to go with this?
And it seems like it's the same as everybody. You know, they just keep going and going and going and don't know when to stop.
Yeah.
You know, but it's understandable in the same light, because he probably would have never arrived at the position that he was in if he hadn't had that mentality to begin with.
Yeah. One thing I find very interesting in these times, though, is that every battle that they're listing, the ruler or king or, you know, whoever's in charge is actually taking place. that is far removed these days. The people that are sending people to war are not the ones fighting on the battlefield, right?
Yep.
And like they said, like some of these people fell. I mean, that one guy, the king of Persia, ran. It's also interesting to see like how quickly the morale of your army falls when your leader bails, right? Or your leader's not there showing strength and leadership at the front lines. So I also find that interesting.
Well, like you said, that's what's different nowadays, right? Is that the morale and leadership were really important. They went hand in hand, and that's why you had to be a leader that was there and showed your ability to lead and fight and everything else, because then people would fall in line and follow you, right? And nowadays, everybody's just kind of talked into, one thing or another.
But the person sending you to war is not the one who's actually doing any of the fighting.
Right, yeah. And, it was interesting seeing that the infighting, though, still existed, which is also prevalent in human history, is that while somebody is out conquering the world for your people, you start fighting about the power within it, and other people try to grasp onto power and grab it as an opportunity, and then we saw that was interesting. That led to the downfall of Sparta, right? So few really interesting tidbits in this, and I found it very informative about Alexander's journey thus far. Just seeing the ground that he's covered already is pretty amazing.
Well, I think it's also just absolutely insane that he's accomplished all of this, and he's like, what, 21?
Yeah,
20,
very,
21?
very young guy.
Like, just wild to
and
me.
how many, potential opportunities for him to die.
Oh, yeah,
right? And he just, keeps going, and that's like the life of a young lad at that time. So anyways, that was part 2, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I definitely am enjoying getting to know Alexander a little bit more. Let us know if you are as well. Let us know if there's anything that they didn't touch on in these in this time period here that you want to add to down below and discuss with our subscribers. We have a great group of subscribers. Thank you so much for supporting us, guys. And make sure you come back for part 3 and part 4, which will be coming in the next couple of weeks. All right, guys, that's it from us today. We'll be back tomorrow, and we'll see you then.
Thanks for watching, guys. See you next time.